I acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which I live and am recording today, the Darumbal people, and pay my respect to elders past and present, for they hold a deep and continuing connection to the land, sea and sky. There's a specific version of this called the Matilda effect. I got curious about this one. It's actually women's scientific contributions getting overlooked or credited to male colleagues. Rosalind Franklin and DNA, Lise Meitner and nuclear fission, Jocelyn Bell Burnell and pulsars. Even the name is a small act of correction. Historian Margaret Rossiter named it after Matilda Jocelyn Gage, a 19th century writer who spent her career documenting exactly this kind of erasure. Welcome to Trailblazing Schools, the podcast for educational leaders at the intersection of leadership, complexity and intelligent technology. I'm Trudy Graham. This is a space for leaders navigating uncharted territory. We explore strategic leadership, ethical innovation, and how AI can strengthen the deeply human work of education. I want you to step back in time with me to the early 90s, when I was a teaching principal in Burketown, a small school in Queensland's Gulf of Carpentaria. 33 students, predominantly Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander students, living in one of the most remote communities in our state. And in endeavouring to build literacy, I looked for texts, picture books, stories where my students could see themselves on the pages and in the stories being shared. Aboriginal kids, remote community, any sort of representation of their own family structures, their version of what a regular week looked like. Fishing, camping, swimming. Groceries weren't acquired while pushing a shopping trolley in a supermarket aisle, but they arrived on the back of an unrefrigerated truck once a week from a town 5 hours away by road. I searched for those books, texts, stories in the library, with publishers' catalogues, even corporate and sponsor stands at conferences that I was able to attend. I found all of one set of readers, city kid, country kids, back at that time. It's better now than it was then if you're looking for picture books and stories for young people that show minority groups or atypical family life. But that gap hasn't closed because publishing got less biased on its own. It closed because people went looking for what was missing and built it. And I share this to open the conversation about bias with large language models, AI. The bias conversation with AI can be interpreted like AI is bad, so it can't be used, or like this bias with AI is a new issue. And I want to highlight that we live, work, and learn within bias every day, especially in education. It's not unique to AI. So let's dig in. Every large language model learns from text that humans wrote, published, translated, and kept. AI doesn't learn reality. It learns whatever fraction of reality got recorded and survived. That means that bias isn't a glitch sitting inside the tech code somewhere. It's actually baked into the training data itself because the data is us. It's the best and the worst of what's been written down by the human race. So when you go looking for the types of bias, you'll find an exhaustive list, some you may never heard of. Here are just 3 that has shown up for me. First one, historical bias, where the model reflects the inequalities that were already there. Things like associating men with leadership and authority, women with care and support, whole regions where either innovation or crime and poverty are called out, because that's the pattern in what's been published. Second one, representation bias. So this is where some people and languages and experiences appear constantly and others barely appear at all. Examples here, Indigenous communities, the Global South, oral knowledge traditions, and low-resource languages. And the third one, publication bias, where what got printed favours the successful experiment over the failed ones, the credentialed expert over the community practitioner, the famous name over the team that actually did the work. None of this makes the tool useless. It makes it a tool you need to understand the same way you'd want to understand any resource you put in front of a classroom. Across this podcast, you'll hear leaders navigating complexity with courage and clarity. If you'd like to see how that looks in practice, visit trailblazingschools.com/field notes. These field notes capture real stories from school leaders using AI as a thinking partner, strengthening leadership, not replacing it. It's free, practical, and designed to prompt your own next step. You'll find it at trailblazingschools.com/field notes. So last year, when I noticed people giving their AI tool names, I got curious and went down a rabbit hole with ChatGPT. I was asking it to help me land on a name. I didn't want something cute. I wanted a name that would remind me every time I opened the tool that I was talking to something built on uneven, incomplete, human-shaped data. It gave me a few options, but the one that landed? Chad. One consonant away from ChatGPT, it's memorable and it's an important reminder for me. And ChatGPT itself described Chad as being helpful, articulate, occasionally overconfident, trained on a mountain of internet text that skews Western, English-speaking and male. Chad loves a trend and a buzzword and a neat-sounding answer. He can sound completely certain while being biased, inaccurate, or incomplete. He's a fast talker, not always a deep thinker. My apologies to any Chads listening in. Naming him this way wasn't a joke at the tool's expense. It was a way of building in a habit. Every time I open ChatGPT, the name itself is doing some of the critical thinking for me. Once you see this pattern, here's what opens up. Firstly, bias isn't only about who's represented badly, it's also about who's not represented at all. These are 2 different problems. And the second one is much easier to miss because there's nothing in the response for you to react to. My earlier episode on the podcast called Risk of Relying on AI for Cultural Knowledge is an example of this. Second, history was never just written by the people who won. It was preserved by whoever controlled the printing press, the archive, the museum, the school system, and the language itself. Power isn't only military, it's administrative. Look at our own example. For generations, Australian history has centred the First Fleet and colonial settlement, while Aboriginal histories that are oral, not written in English, were pushed to the margins or filtered through a colonial lens. The real question is, when one culture's knowledge is oral and another's is written and archived, whose history survives in institutional memory. And third, there's a specific version of this called the Matilda effect. I got curious about this one. It's actually women's scientific contributions getting overlooked or credited to male colleagues. Rosalind Franklin and DNA, Lise Meitner and nuclear fission, Jocelyn Bell Burnell and pulsars. Even the name is a small act of correction. Historian Margaret Rossiter named it after Matilda Jocelyn Gage, a 19th century writer who spent her career documenting exactly this kind of erasure. Now, fourth, this isn't a new problem that AI invented. Here's the thing. Did you know that J.K. Rowling was told to publish under her initials because the publishers didn't think teenage boys would read a book by a woman named Joanne? Marianne Evans wrote as George Eliot. The bias in AI training data is just decades of downstream bias in what got published in the first place. And finally, our curriculum, the Australian curriculum, already knows this and it's actively working against it. The cross-curriculum priorities on Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander histories, the intercultural understanding capability, the mandate to teach migration stories and civil rights and diverse literature, that's proof this can be corrected on purpose. It just takes someone deciding to go looking for what's missing. This is some of the foundational knowledge that I build into my AI professional development workshops, either for leadership teams, teaching teams, or your whole staff. Connect with me if you'd love to explore more in this space. So as I wrap out this episode, here's the one question I want you to take away. Next time you ask ChatGPT, or any other AI tool for an answer, ask yourself one thing. Whose experience made it into the answer and whose didn't? And here's a practical next step for this week. Open whatever AI tool you use and ask it directly. What are the biases in your training data? Use that as the prompt. Read what it gives you back, not to catch it out, but to get a concrete, specific list of the biases you're working with. Because a vague sense that AI might be biased doesn't change the way you use it, and a specific list does. You too might end up down a rabbit hole and exploring different types of biases and getting curious about how this technology is working. So looping back to the classroom in Burketown, the gap in culturally appropriate children's literature didn't close by accident. Someone had to go looking for what wasn't there. Large language models have the same gap. It's just built out of data instead of a publisher's catalogue. I want you to ask the questions, see what it says, and go looking for what it leaves out. Until next time, take care. You've been listening to Trailblazing Schools with me, Trudy Graham. If this episode brought someone to mind, share it with them. You'll find further reflections, practical resources and leadership tools in the show notes. Until next time, lead with courage, seek clarity and keep trailblazing.